I'm Mitchell Karasik, and I'm here with Randy Cross. We're talking NFL Draft Round 1, as it's just finished up last night. And let's get right to it. The #1 overall pick, Sam Bradford. Your thoughts on Sam Bradford, and did the Rams do the right thing?
Well, Bradford sort of is the perfect kind of poster boy for this draft in a lot of ways. I mean, obviously, character is a huge issue now for the teams, and you don't have any character issues with Sam. But on the other side of the coin, besides the fact that he threw well when he was in shorts and nobody dropped the ball, of course, nobody was covering them either. But on the other side of that is the issue that he's got a medical problem or an issue. So in his case, it's a medical problem. He separates his shoulder twice. Dr. Andrews has to operate on his shoulder. Luckily for him, it's his left shoulder. But he is going to go play for the Rams. And I don't know if anybody gets sacked more than a Ram quarterback. So I think you look into the second and third day of the draft, you're probably going to see them address that offensive line pretty aggressively.
Yeah, they're going to have to fill that need. And you're right, it's a good point that when you have a quarterback coming in #1 pick, but there's some medical questions anytime you haven't played half of your last season, whether or not that shoulder will hold up. And it's not his throwing one, but that is an issue. But now looking at what's happened here, as Jimmy Clausen is available in round 2, would it have been smarter for the Rams, and you don't know it ahead of time, would you rather have Clausen in round 2 and perhaps one of the defensive tackles in round 1 rather than Bradford 1 and then whoever you end up right now with in round 2? Would that have maybe been a better strategy for the Rams?
Well, you know, NFL is a weird place. And I mean that from the standpoint of stories and innuendos and gossip, and because there is nothing physically that would tell you you don't want Jimmy Clausen. And Buffalo needs a quarterback. Cleveland needs a quarterback. You know, go down the list. God knows Oakland needs a quarterback. They're just paying the wrong one. There's a whole, but for some reason the guy kept dropping. And I understand the slide idea. Of course, you got a pot of teams that don't need one, so he's not going to get drafted anywhere in there. But that doesn't mean someone can't jump up and make a deal and try to grab him.
And to you, is Jimmy Clausen a first-round type guy?
Talent-wise, absolutely. But and I'm not. I've known the kid for the last 3 years or so. Our son's both quarterbacks, and I've been at camps with him and been around him and talked to him a little bit. Delightful guy. But there is something about this guy that he's got some kind of mojo on him that's not good from a rep standpoint. And somebody's going to get a hell of a deal because you're going to get a young quarterback, much like we've seen teams do the last few years, whether it's Chad Henne, Kevin Cobb, guys like that go high in the second round. But that first contract's wonderful for the team.
Yeah.
For the player, it's not so much, but for the team, it is.
And it's been interesting. We've seen a lot of the guys go in round 2 and round 3 quarterback-wise sometimes that are better than the guys that go in the top of the draft. So, you know, this could be that situation again where Colt McCoy, Jimmy Clausen, maybe they go in obviously round 2, round 3, probably round 2. They could be even better than the 2 guys in Tebow and Bradford that went in round 1.
Well, it's one of the great things about, we were talking a little bit earlier about technology and the internet. Go to NFL.com and look at the draft tracker and go through the years, but don't look at the first round. Look at the second round. And I mean go back. Keep going back every year. Go back to the drafts earlier last decade. Go back to the 90s drafts. Go back to the 80s drafts. You'll be stunned at the production difference between the second round picks and the first round picks. First round picks make all the money. Second round picks are the double-digit careers, Hall of Fame guy. I mean, it's really wild how often that's worked out. Second round and below. So this is the time of the draft where everybody gets to take a deep breath and say, well, thank God the first round's over. Now let's pick some really good football players.
And it's interesting, a different setting now. As you said, they can take a deep breath literally because it used to just be all one day and then they come back the next day and you finish it. But now it's spread out over 3 days. Round 1, obviously finished. Round 2, round 3 coming up here. Do you like the new format that you have?
I liked last night. I thought last night was pretty crazy. Yeah. I like the way the teams handled it. They handled it differently. You know, when things started sliding, Oakland always surprises people, and it surprised a lot of people that they drafted Rolando McClain because he's a 3-4 inside linebacker, and they run a 4-3.
Right.
But he's a great inside linebacker, so I can see that.
Great player, maybe wrong fit for that team, though, perhaps.
But when the DN, Ilewalu, from Cal, when he went to Jacksonville, it seemed like it was a light switch. And suddenly teams just got on that phone, just deal after deal after deal after deal, and going after specific people.
Yeah.
And there's guys that might have been drafted in that pod, that 10 to 15 pod, that are still on the board right now.
Yeah, it was interesting how right there, all of a sudden, you saw a lot of teams just jump in there and make trades. One of them, the San Francisco 49ers, I like a lot what they did. They drafted 2 offensive linemen, Anthony Thomas, Anthony Davis, and of course Micah Pooty. That'll really help their offensive line. Reminds me of the Jets a little bit. A couple of years ago, they needed to rebuild. They brought in DeBrickshaw Ferguson and of course Nick Mangold in one draft, solidify that offensive line, which is so important. And then they kind of built out from there. And the 49ers, same thing maybe right now.
Well, and they were able to kind of load up their backpack a little bit by moving down. And it's not huge. I mean, you go down a couple of spots, you're going to get a high, you're going to get a third. You get down to the middle of the first round, you might get a low third or a fourth. But those draft picks, suddenly you go from having 10 picks to now I've got 12 picks. And just ups your percentages, ups your chances. I mean, not everybody wants to draft like the Giants had in 2008, when people looked up halfway through the season and went, "Wow, these guys are all playing." If you can get that out of your draft and do that the majority of the time, you've got a long career in this business.
Yeah, you can be a big winner from that standpoint. Absolutely. How about Pete Carroll in Seattle? His first draft in Seattle, I think they did pretty well, filled some holes on the offensive line, and of course at safety as well.
I love his pick. For his new Walter Jones at left tackle. I thought that was a heck of a get with Okun.
Okun will certainly help.
And because he's a top 5 talent, and you got him down there where you got him, and then getting Earl Thomas where they got him. There was only one thing bad about it for Pete Carroll, and that is he's got to take the phone calls from Mays' family and say, "Now wait a minute, you recruited this kid, you played him for 4 years. How come you didn't draft him?"
Which is interesting, and I think some people later on this draft might be thinking that as well. As he continues to fall, he's still there right now in round 2 available. So that is something that is pretty interesting. He didn't take his guy at a position that they had a need for. Who's somebody else that you think really maybe fell or is falling?
Well, the obvious one is Clausen. I wouldn't leave Colt McCoy out of the mix. Because, I talked about Buffalo, I talked about Cleveland. They're still, I think, bent on having a quarterback. Now, there might be a pretty good chance that both of them say, we'll let it slide a little bit. We've got ammo in the 3rd round. Maybe we can move up. Bill Belichick's got 3 picks in the 2nd round, so he's going to be everybody's best friend. I think that was really impressive. I thought Sergio Kindle, the medical concerns with him, must have been more than people were willing to take a bite off of.
And he's had some issues off the field as well.
The offense, yeah, running into buildings. People tend to downgrade you for that. Charles Brown, the tackle from USC, I thought was big. There was a list of corners that could have gone in that mid to low 1st round that are still on the board, and several of them have got those little flags and dings, whether it's physical or character or whatever you want to call it. So defensive linemen, to me, if I had to say where's there going to be a run, there's going to be a run on running backs, there's going to be a run on wide receivers, and there's going to be a run on interior defensive linemen, because you've got some guys on the board still that are like Terrence Cody. Everybody wants to run a 3-4. That guy's 350 pounds. One person won't block that guy. I don't care which center you put. You put Mangold on him, he needs help. So
he's too big.
Yeah. So from a planning standpoint, defensively, it's a great way to free up your linebackers. And people say, well, he's so huge, he'll only play 6-7 years. So if he only plays 6 or 7 years, the average career is 3.
Yeah.